Hey lovelies, you're welcome back to Reviews and Recaps. Let's talk about Derrick Jaxn's interview with Dear Future Wifey Podcast. Now, shout out to Lataris. I absolutely love him and I love his podcast, Dear Future Wifey. If you have not been on his podcast, I've been following him since the beginning, I will encourage you to head over there and watch his podcast. Okay, now let's get into it. So I absolutely watched part 1 and part 2 of the interview with Derrick Jaxn, and honestly, she is so relatable. She is so smart. She's so beautiful. And I enjoyed her. It's been a while since I watched an interview from start until finish and just enjoyed it. She was totally relatable. She was really fun to watch. I absolutely enjoyed it. Now, let's talk about some things that she said, honey. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and tap that bell for notification so you know every single time that I post. Also, give this video a thumbs up so other people can find it. Now, let's get into this. So, she said certain things. One of the things she said that really struck a chord was that she knew other women's bodies better than she knew herself, her own body, right? So she talks about how she would watch sex tapes of her husband, Derrick Jaxn, and watch what he's doing with other women. And then she will try to imitate it. She will go on these people's Instagram pages to look at how they dress, their bodies, things like that. And she talks about how it was such a low point to be in. And I completely agree. It was so sad to hear her say that. Imagine what level you must have gotten to the point where you are going on other people's social media, other people that are sleeping with your husband, and you are checking out their pages, you are looking at the sex tape, you're watching them, you're taking notes, you're looking at how they dress, what they look like, oh my goodness, that is intense. And I can only imagine how traumatic that must have been for her, because you get to a point where it's you don't even have an identity now because you're taking on board all these things this women are doing and you're turning it into who you are. And one thing that came across in the interview was that she talked about her husband had a preference for darker women, and that her daughter, one of her daughters, came out looking like that preference. And that initially was a struggle for her to bond with that kid because she had to address how she felt about that. Oh my goodness. When I tell you that blew my mind, imagine the level of pain and trauma that someone must have entered into and reached to be able to get to that point where seeing their child come out in the same preference that their husband likes over them and has chosen over them continually. And then now you have to deal with a child looking like that. My goodness. That was so heartbreaking to hear. But one thing I really enjoyed about the interview was that she was very transparent. Also, she came across as someone who has dealt with a lot of the issues, right? Now, it does come across as she's dealt with a lot of the issues, and she is still healing. Healing is not done, healed. Yes, right? However, healing is a continuous process. Healing is something where, especially mental healing, right? So you could be healed as a whole and your mind is better, right? However, there could still be certain triggers that you do not know you have until they rear their heads. It's for instance, you may not have even known that having someone in the complexion of her husband's preference would have been an issue until she had her daughter and her daughter was looking like his preference. So sometimes when we so-called go through traumatic experiences and we feel that we are healed, sometimes certain things make us realize that we're not there. So if I actually share my personal experience now, trigger warning everyone, from a lot of the sexual assault and abuse and stuff that I faced in my life. And when I think about how initially there was a point where I really thought I was healed and all good, right? However, when certain people would just touch me casually, like in public, you grab me randomly, you touch me. Of course, no one should really be touching you like that. But you know how like you could be hanging with your friends, your friend grab you, your friend touches you, and then it just feels like you've been attacked. It just feels like you've been through the ringer. And then, and then I'm like, why you know what I mean? And then, wow. And you just realize that's a trigger for you. Like even for instance, there was a time where a friend of mine slept over at my house and we're in the same bed. She slept on her side, I slept on my side. And in the middle of the night, she made the mistake of like stretching and like touching me. And then I like grabbed her hand and like held her hand until the morning. And she tried to pull and I just did not let go. And that is something that I thought I was good, right? I didn't think there was anything left. But then when in my body felt I could potentially be in a crazy situation, my body cramped up and just tried to protect me, even though I was not even awake to protect myself, right? Of course, that was not her intention. It's just like, girl, she just stretched, honey. Like, she was not trying to come for me, right? But my body has held on to that trauma, even though I knew and felt that I was healed. My body held on to that trauma. So now the knee-jerk reaction for my body is like, fight. Someone held you. No, respond with that aggression. And so, yes, I agree and accept the fact that she said she's healed. But I still think like healing is a continuous journey, and that, yes, she could be healed at the core of it, which is excellent and amazing. But then there could still be things that come up over time and like certain triggers that would show areas where she still needs a bit of work. But it was very good to see who she is. It was very good to see her outside of like the social media, the bonnet, the helmets of salvation thing, and all of that. And it was good to actually see her talk about these things, right? Now, there was one thing I also wanted to mention was that before she actually got married to him, he was extremely promiscuous. He was having sex with multiple women. And she talked about a thing where she even had like a days that, or she had a list of days that she would go see him. And sometimes when she's leaving, another woman is walking up and they're seeing each other in like the corridor. That is wild. But I completely see how she got there. She talked about her experience of when she was assaulted. Trigger warning, sorry guys. Where she was assaulted and how she never dealt with it. And she sort of just buried it under the rug like it never happened and just moved on. And I know certain people that have not experienced that might feel like, how can you do that? Girl, I did the same thing. I did. And I did not deal with it for years. It was like it never happened. It was like it never happened. But then when certain things started to rear their heads, at a certain point in my life, then it then became something where I was like, wow, girl, you need to deal with this before this thing consumes you. Like, you need to sit back and really think back as to all of the things that have happened, and you need to start dealing. Like it came crashing, like everything came crashing out at some point, right? It's just luckily I did not get to that point where I entered into a relationship, right? Yes, I had relationships, but I was never emotionally available to even get to the point where I was then sort of controlled by the particular man or person that I was dating, right? But in her case, unfortunately, and the thing is, we have to understand that people's trauma shows up differently, right? And so in her traumatic experience, it was like, okay, she found solace in meeting somebody. She met him 3 weeks later, right? So she met him right after things were fresh, but she wasn't thinking about it. She was trying to close her mind to it and move on. And then she met this man who was coming across as such a nice guy, someone who was into her and all of that. And she was the nerd. She already had self-esteem issues to begin with. Because the way she talks about herself as someone who was a nerd with like acne and stuff like that, or with pimples. And it was just interesting that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, right? And imagine how she must have been at that time where it was like, she thought she wasn't the cute girl. She thought that, not Danae, she thought that Derrick is or was the prize, right? And so I can understand how she would be able to get into that position. But what I did like about her is the fact that she took accountability for her part. Even there was a point where she said she was a willing participant. No, I hear that. I hear what she's saying in the sense that she accepted it. She proceeded with it. She continued to let it happen. But then I also feel like it was hard for her not to let it happen, considering the trauma that she had experienced. She already had self-esteem issues, then coupled with the fact that the assault happened, right? And so then, in a way, she was probably just seeing Derrick as her savior, in my opinion, okay? She didn't say this. This is just what I'm saying, right? It's given, oh my God, finally get into it with this cool guy who everyone wants to be with, but wants to be with me. She then started to see her source of validation in Derrick. She started to see him as a source of validation. She started to see him as being boosting her self-esteem. To be recognized as being the one that ends up with Derrick is a boosting thing for her. It's like, ooh, you bagged this one, right? And I think that was part of the reasons why she basically stayed initially, right? And continued to stay even though he was cheating with a bunch of people, and still proceeded to marry him, right? Like even when she talks about the proposal and how she was so excited and all of that, like it's interesting because you're like, after everything this man has done, how are you even excited to marry him? But like I said, this is why it's so important that when you have a lot of trauma, when you have trauma to that extent, or when you even have like, they're basic traumas that, okay, like even the basic of traumas, I feel like you need to be healed first before you get into a relationship. Because the problem with getting into a relationship before you're healed is there is a risk that when you're fully healed, you will never want to be with this person because that person must be toxic by themselves to be able to attract such a toxic person like you. Okay? And so that's why I'm such a believer of heal first. Of course, like I said, the healing will still be continuous, but heal first to a good, solid place. Okay? Because if you're not healed first to a good, solid place, you are going to date, attract, and marry someone horrid. Okay? And then when you end up with this horrible person, right? And when you then do the work on yourself, you will then realize and sit down and sit back and think, how did I get here? But then the truth is, you got here because you weren't healed at that point. And so that is what you attracted and that is what you kept. Okay? You didn't have the tools at the time to know any better. So you did not choose better for yourself. Right? And so that's why you see like a lot of relationships where people start off, it's like a trauma bond at the start. One is looking for, I don't know, some sort of solace. The other person is just looking for companionship, whatever the case may be, right? They get together and then they are married for like 6, 7, 10 years or so, right? And then one person starts doing the work. One person starts seeking counseling. One person starts working on themselves. And then they wake up and they think, why is my partner not working on him? Why is she not working on herself? Right? She is clearly troubled. She needs healing. But the only reason that that partner is seeing that the other partner needs healing is because that person has now come out from that place of trauma to a place of healing. And so suddenly it's like, yo, you need healing, right? And so that's something that I honestly feel like we need to really work on, and not jump into relationships when we're dealing with a lot, when we have trauma, when we have baggage. We need to deal. Of course, you would still always have some remnants, right? But before you move on to start dating people and choosing a lifelong spouse, I would say work on your healing first. So that is one thing I would say. And I appreciated the fact that at the end of towards the end of the podcast, when she was talking to the terrace, she basically said she does not have any plans of dating anytime soon. She needs to work on herself, and the thing is, and heal properly, because if she doesn't, she's going to end up in the same situation. And I appreciated that level of insight and accountability, because some people, they would leave that toxic relationship and jump into another toxic relationship and be like, oh my God, he's such a nice person. No, girl, you don't know if he's a nice person yet, because you don't even know who a nice person is. You can't differentiate someone who is love bombing you from someone who genuinely wants to be with you. You can't differentiate a good man. You wouldn't know a good man even if he slapped you in the face. Right? Well, a good man wouldn't smack you in the face, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to use that analogy that people say, right? But my point is, you're not at a place of being whole to attract a whole partner. So it's like, take that time, take that step back, heal, and then you will attract a whole person. Now, let's talk about another thing that she said. She said that Derrick Jaxn gave her a list of about 100 women that he had had something to do with. Wow. 100 as a married man, right? You have to be, like, something has to be wrong with you at the core of who you are for you to be dealing with 100 women when you have someone that you've been dating since you were 19. Like, something must be wrong. Like, a lot of things are wrong somewhere, right? Like, he needs a lot of deliverance. He needs healing because something ain't right. Like, a lot of people don't even end up sleeping with 100 people in their lifetime. Not to talk of someone who has always been in a committed relationship since 19. Like, what? How? When did you find the time? Like, seriously, were you doing 2, 5 or 5 at once? Like, I don't understand, you know? And so imagine, like, what sort of toll that would take on your wife to be able to look back and see a list of 100 people that you have smashed. And then after she finally forgives him and tells him, I've forgiven you, how can this man say to her 2 days later, of course I'm paraphrasing, but he said he doesn't want them anymore. So he doesn't want to be with her anymore, right? And then she's like, okay, if that's what you want. And then this ninja decides to go and do a video basically on his platform saying, if someone says, okay, if that's what you want, that's manipulative. I'm like, dude, like, first of all, who texts their wife saying he does not want to do it anymore? He does not want to be married anymore. Who does that? That is hella rude. You couldn't even pick up the phone. You live in the same house with this woman. You could not say, okay, babe, can I speak to you for a second and have a face-to-face conversation? But instead you decide that, ooh, let me text her. Like, wow, someone you've been with since you were 19. That's how you gonna do her? Like, that is insane. That is insane. And that woman, like, honestly, I thank God that she has God. Because the average person would have lost their minds. The average person would have lost it all, right? But you see her, she's saying she's getting there, she's healing, she's thriving. You can just see like her general outward appearance and even the way she speaks has improved. Like, she is thriving, honey. She is thriving. And that's only because she has God. Because if she did not, who knows where she would be right now? Who knows? Now, I hold people accountable on this platform, okay? So now, there's still one thing that I didn't quite agree with, right? So that video where she was reading or telling people that anyone who is spewing lies or this and this and this, may their kids be vagabonds and all of that. I do not agree with that at all. I don't think she should have done that. I know that in the video, she was trying to explain it as the fact that, yes, she did that, but it was her just, reading scripture, relying on the word. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. And I understand because I'm a follower of the word, right? So I get it, right? But at the same time, you have to understand how people will feel if you're coming on a public platform to be saying their children are going to be vagabonds and all that stuff. Like, people are going to think you're unhinged. And I personally would not do that, right? Would not behave in that way. And I don't think it's right that she did that. If I'm being completely honest, that's how I feel. You guys are allowed to disagree with me in the comment section if that's how you feel. But that's how I feel about it. But all in all, I enjoyed the interview. I thought she was being very transparent. She was being very honest. And I thoroughly enjoyed her. I know it was very traumatic to hear her say her stories, share her experiences. But it was lovely just seeing her in a good space. And that's what I'm going to end it for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Let's continue this conversation. Have you guys watched the full interviews? Let me know what you guys thought of the interview. And yeah, like, was there anything that really struck you guys and struck a chord with you guys? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.